Eno, how you doing this week?
Doing great. I'm wondering how this trade deadline is going to go. I mean, there's so few sellers, and it's an exciting time in baseball, but there's so
Yeah.
few sellers, and everybody thinks they're a buyer. The Angels out here with a 15% chance of making the playoffs are buying the best starter on the market. So, I think I'm always a little pessimistic with the expanded playoffs that the trade deadline is going to be any good, and yet a lot of times we look up and it was pretty exciting in the end.
Well, of course, the biggest news is always going to be Ohtani. Please give me your top three where you think he could go.
Yeah.
Wait, I thought Ohtani was getting traded.
Anaheim,
That was
Anaheim,
what
Anaheim.
I thought. Disneyland. He's going to Magic Mountain. I thought he was going to get traded. What's going on?
Yeah, to be fair to the Angels, like I did this, they're like, oh, only a 50% chance to make the playoffs. Well, guess what? They haven't had a lot of times where this year, this late in the season, they had a 15% chance of making the playoffs. They'll take a 1-5 chance of making the playoffs. And then you have Ohtani go out there and win 2 games by himself, throwing a shutout and hitting 2 homers in the nightcap. I mean, he's doing ridiculous things out there. They have a bad schedule. If you look at the Angels, they have a bad schedule. They get the Braves, in interleague play. They get the Mets and the Phillies. Like it's not the easiest schedule for them, even outside of the division. So, I think it's going to be tough for them, but I say, go for it. Who knows
Yeah.
if this guy in Double-A, this young catcher, he's nice, but like people say he can't even catch. What if he ends up being a guy that can't catch enough to catch and can't hit enough to be a first baseman? Then you made the right deal.
I've never been a front office guy. But I would say I've been around long enough to know there could be a problem if a guy is a catcher and he can't catch. I mean, that might be a problem.
Well, the idea is he could grow into it. He's younger,
He could
they've
grow
been
into
aggressive with him.
I always love that. That is something, by the way, and we'll get into Giolito getting traded to the Angels. And, I mean, my God, Verlander's out there now. Rumors about, of course, his wife is the superstar living in Los Angeles. You know, obviously everything's going to point to LA, but
The
maybe the
Rangers
Angels.
really want a top line pitcher.
Maybe the Angels could pull off Verlander if he wants it. Then
I
the
don't
talk
think they have enough left.
the talk is, Houston could want him again, Texas, so all of that. But have you? I was thinking about it the other day, just watching MLB Network, and they were kicking around all these guys' names, and they got to the Cubs, and they're like, who, by the way, the Cubs may want to hold on to some guys and go for it. Who knows? But Stroman and Bellinger, and it got me thinking because they threw out all these different names about, oh, you got to move him and move him. I started thinking, how many prospects really are there out there? We keep selling these known commodities, all need to be moved for unknown. Like the unknown has become so great in baseball. These unknown prospects, are there really that many unknown great guys out there? How many unknown nameless, faceless prospects to the baseball world, not to the scouting world and the front office world, but are there really that many good prospects? Are we really, the future of baseball is just so bright that we have this abundance of just, oh
Well,
my God, these guys in the minor leagues are amazing.
it's the siren song of the 6 years of team control and the 3 of them at a minimum salary. It's all about sort of salary suppression in a way. It's this idea that like we might have a great young player that we pay $600,000 a year for 3 years.
Oh,
That's what they're going for. But it's interesting that the prices have, in terms of what people are willing to spend for players, in terms of prospects, they've dropped so far that I think it might make sense to be a buyer, because you just got Lucas Giolito, who is the best rental arm on the market, and Reynaldo Lopez, who is a very good setup man. You just got both those guys, and you didn't give up. I mean, some lists have Edgar Carrero, the catcher, in the top 100, but at 80, and some lists don't have
they
him.
were what, 2 and 3 in the Angels system?
Yeah, but the Angel system is horrible. So you
Yeah.
got to think about it in general terms. And so they barely got a top 100 prospect back. Let's give them one top 100 prospect in that deal top 100 prospects have a sort of a 50-50 chance of being major leaguers. It gets worse after that. And so you're going to see all these guys. Enrique Hernandez got traded, and Ahmed Rosario got traded. The Dodgers, they didn't get traded for top 100 prospects. They got traded for people who have a 20% chance of being big leaguers, you know? And so there are teams where it makes sense to just add, and it also says, why should I sell if I'm the Cubs? If you're going to give me back that a guy who has like a 40%, like what's Bellinger going to get you? A rental Bellinger? Maybe he gets you a top 100 prospect. I get a 50-50 chance. I have a 50-50 chance almost of making the playoffs if I think about it in terms of my division. Like I just have to get past the Reds who are falling and the Brewers who have no offense, and I'm at 500. So like I have to weigh that chance of making the playoffs with this player that you're giving me that may not work out either.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Carlos Santana was just traded to the Brewers, right? I mean,
That changes everything.
right, yeah, the whole way.
But
And
that's
then
the
I
kind of
also
trade I would make if I was running a front office. I would make the Carlos Santana trades. I would make the smaller trades. If you think about it, remember the Braves when they went to the World Series? They got Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario,
yeah,
and Adam Duvall. They remade their entire outfield because they'd lost
Acuna.
Acuna,
Yeah.
and they didn't pay a single prospect that's in the big leagues or now for those three guys. Like I don't think they'll ever lose any sleep over the guys they paid for those. So I would love to make my team better by like grabbing a guy who fits a need here, like the Dodgers are doing with Rosario and Enrique Hernandez, two guys who can hit lefties, who can play the infield and play the outfield. Like that's the kind of thing I would do. I would try to buy smart and cheap.
Before we'll get to the A's and what you think the end of the deadline is going to look like, because some teams may get a little desperate here, and there's a reason for that. But when you look at what the Angels just did, is there a chance? Because everybody thinks that for sure Ohtani's gone. Is there still a chance they do make a run? And Ohtani, who actually does like playing there, and you still do have Mike Trout there, and they're looking to go add and they're looking to win. Is there a chance he still, in the end, we make all this fuss about it, in the end, he just stays in Anaheim?
There's a possibility. They've done a lot of things to make him comfortable. In fact, their assistant pitching coach is one that he worked with in the offseason. The guy they just hired to be the assistant pitching coach was a guy he'd been working with in the offseason. So they've done this where they're listening to their star and they've tried to make him comfortable. And this is partially part of the process of wooing him, from the Anaheim Angels standpoint. It's like, hey, we made our team better, dude. We care about you. We don't want you to play meaningless games. We want you to play meaningful games, and we want to make the playoffs. And we just went and got Lucas Giolito. We just got the best rental starter that was available because we think you need help there. So, Mike Trout's going to come back in like a week. Handmade bones are just about pain and how much pain you can handle. He can handle some pain. So I think Mike Trout's going to be back in a week. I think they will make it close. I just think it's tough. They're up against a Rangers team that banked so many wins already, and they're up against an Astros team that just seems to just be a juggernaut. So, and I don't think they'll necessarily get any help in the wild card race because the AL East is a tough division that's probably going to produce 2 wild cards.
All right, so take my Verlander rumor about the Dodgers off the record. Your partner in crime, because I believe everything I read on The Athletic and everything I get from people on Twitter from The Athletic. The Commander has just sent me this. Dodgers are close to getting Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, who's got a great arm, but he just seems like such a weird dude. But anyway, Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly.
You wore a
going
mariachi outfit to meet the president.
Well, you and I both know the last time they were here, he was fighting in the clubhouse. No, a lot of people don't know about that, but after in the Oakland series against the White Sox, he was fighting with his own teammates in the clubhouse. I mean,
Oh, and he had a whole he made the whiner face at Carlos Correa and stuff. Like,
yeah, he's a weird dude, but he's got a great arm, right? What do you think about that? Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly, according to
yeah,
Ken
I thought
Rosenthal,
that was going to go to the Rays. The Rays were rumored there. Yeah, Lance Lynn is another type of guy that I would love to get because I don't think he'll cost that much. He's a rental, not a lot of team control that I have to pay for. And he is actually in the top 30 in the big leagues in strikeout minus walk rate among starters. So yeah, I don't want to say that he's been completely unlucky and he doesn't deserve his 6 ERA, but I do want to say in terms of striking guys out and limiting walks, he's still good. You know, and if you can just figure out why there's this other stuff going on, then, and I think I trust the Dodgers pitching coaches pretty well. They're pretty good at getting the most out of their guys. So this is one where, again, I think they've done a smart thing. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, so that's where let's go to the A's. And I think about that where, like, if I'm acquiring Lance Lynn from the Dodgers, I'm not acquiring Lance Lynn's numbers from the White Sox. I think I'm bringing him in here and he's going to do a lot for us. So I think about that because a lot of the A's players, their numbers are down. But when you start to think about the trading deadline, guys didn't have to make deals. And I say guys, I mean front office people, because obviously Kim Ng has just pulled off a nice deal for the Marlins.
David Robertson, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can't make a move now in the waiver wire process like we used to have, you have to, if you got to make something by this deadline or that's it. So that's where I wonder teams that aren't as there's a lot of buyers, not a lot of sellers. Could it be possible that David Forst's phone is ringing at the very last minute and like, well, I'd rather make a deal, in the end, Ramon Laureano, he's got playoff experience. I know the numbers. I know after the PED suspension, but you know what? I need to make some type. Tony Kemp, I need to make some type of move. Is that when the A's really get on the board here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting names. Trevor May, not everyone knows he's throwing a sweeper now too. So he's throwing two different sliders. He's got a really good changeup because he's throwing Spencer Strider's slider and then also a sweeper. So he's got two different sliders and this splitter. I think he can help a bullpen, and he's a free agent. So that's an obvious one. Tony Kemp is a free agent, and somebody might think that he doesn't necessarily have a ton of value, but I would say that the trades of Ahmed Rosario and Enrique Hernandez say that Tony Kemp does have value because one of the rarer things in baseball is a guy who can play the infield and the outfield. There's just something about it that they're so different. The skills are so different that you don't normally have. You have your infielders, even the way the roster, if you look at active rosters on MLB.com, there's the infield group and the outfield group. Like we separate them. I remember Daniel Murphy, they were just trying to get him on the field in New York. They put him in the outfield and they had to do a chalk outline of how bad he was out there. And he never played the outfield again. Yeah. So, there are players that just can't do that. And so if you're a team that, could use a lefty that does grinds out at bats, he doesn't hit the ball hard, but he gets on base. He's fast. He could be, kind of a last player on a contender where, he's our pinch runner. He can play the infield. He can play the outfield. He's left-handed. Like, he could be that kind of bat. I could see somebody acquiring him. But then I think the most fascinating is Ramon Laureano because, in terms of hitting the ball hard, you mentioned the suspension. He has still hit the ball hard after the suspension. We talk about maximum exit velocity. He has one around 111. That puts him in the sort of top quartile of the league. That's a good exit velocity. He barrels at about 10% of that. That's above average. That's good. It hasn't turned into a lot of power, partially because of the stadium, partially because of whatever. But there are things you like about him. Also, it's really, really hard to get a center fielder in trades right now. Bellinger is the only guy basically that can play center field that's available. I know Laureano is not the best center fielder. He can still play center field for you. And then lastly, he has team control. So you're not just buying from this year. You would have him until 2020. You'd have him, next year and 2025. So he could be somebody that you slot in and say, this guy can help us for a couple years. And his value is so low that if the A's try to come at you and say, well, he's got years of control, you got to pay for those. You got to give us a better prospect. I would say he's not even playing every day for your team. You brought him off the IL and he didn't even start that game when he came off the IL. He is losing time in your outfield to Blade and Rooker and these guys. So you can't tell me that you really value those years of team control. You can't, what you want a backup outfielder for the next 2 years, 3 years, like, give me him. He fits on my roster better. I need a right-hander. I need a guy who can play center field. The Phillies need a right-hander. The Yankees need a right-hander, a right-handed outfield bat. They could use somebody that can also play center field. Harrison Bader's always hurt, so Phillies have the worst outfield defense in baseball. You put Kyle Schwarber at DH, you put Laureano in left field, and you put Bryce Harper at first base, and all of a sudden you make that entire outfield better defensively. So I think Laureano is really fascinating, especially since Tyler O'Neill, the Cardinals are making noise like they're taking him off the trade deadline, and they're not going to trade him. He's like Tyler O'Neill, hits the ball hard, misses a lot, he's right-handed, plays good defense. Like, if you wanted Tyler O'Neill, you should look at Ramon Laureano.
I would just love to be on that conversation with you and David Forrest when you go, he doesn't even play for you.
Yeah.
He doesn't even play for you every
Tell
day.
me you
What
need
are
a better prospect.
smoking?
You put him in the lineup then if you like him so much.
You like him so much. I would love to hear that. I'd be sitting there with the popcorn, that Michael Jackson meme. That would be great. Going today is JP Sears. Want to go back to an article that you did about guys. You've talked a lot about pitch shaping, right? And we got new pitches. All of a sudden the sweepers become, and JP Sears is a sweeper guy. And it's just fascinating to watch professional athletes always trying to get better and improve themselves.
Yeah. And, in particular, I talked to JP Sears, Hunter Brown, JP France, and Clark Schmidt about, what they've done. And that was three, different organizations. So you get a little bit of a sense of, what different organizations, how they talk to their players and what their pitchers talk about. And all three of them talked about movement profiles, talked about, my induced vertical break, my horizontal break. That's the language of new pitching development, and that's straight out of Stuff Plus. And that's like, oh, they told me my Stuff Plus would be better on my slider if I threw it harder, or if I threw it this way, I threw it that way. So that's the normal part. But I was fascinated about sort of the second level, which is, how does this all fit together? And so Hunter Brown added a sweeper. He throws a 92-mile-an-hour Verlander-esque slider, but he thought I need another weapon against righties, so he started throwing a sweeper. JP France started throwing his secondaries harder, but in the minors, he could get everybody to fish on a curveball outside of the zone. He can't get major league hitters to fish on the curveball out of the zone as much. And so he's been throwing the changeup a lot more in the zone, and his strikeout rates in the minors, 30%. In the majors, 17%. It's night and day, but he said it's about getting outs. And, if they're not going to fish on my curveball like they did in the minors, yeah. And Clark Schmidt he said it outright. He was the most upfront about this. He said, it's not my job to maximize Stuff Plus. It's not my job to only throw my best pitches by Stuff Plus. It's not my job to be a reliever out there for 5 innings. It's actually my job to be a starter, turn the lineup over 3 times, show some pitchability, and tell a story where I put all of my pitches together in a way that gets me through a whole start.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm confused. You're telling me that a job of a pitcher is not about what his data says. It's actually about getting the other team's hitters out? I'm confused. You know what? Now you're going to go tell me that the data doesn't matter and that it only matters if you score more runs than the other team. And that's when I'm going to say you're out of your mind. You don't know baseball.
Yeah. No, I mean, the data is still super important for them in terms of what they're doing. But, I think what you're also seeing, like from Sears, for example, is, the data did tell him that like he has good ride for a guy who throws lower, right? And so he does trust his fastball. But as he's trying to, get through lineups more, he's had to develop his secondaries more. And I think I'm looking at the numbers right now. I think he's throwing 2 sliders right now. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because if you throw a sweeper, he has a fastball, a sweeper, and a change. That makes him fastball sweeper against righties and fastball change against lefties. It's always better to have another pitch in there.
No doubt. You always want to be able to go, whether it's righty, lefty, you always want to be able to go in on a hitter, and you want to be
Yeah.
able to go away from a hitter, because
Yeah.
now we just can't look one zone. I'm going to use a golf analogy here, and it's because we just recently had the British Open. It's the Open Championship over in England, the oldest major in all of golf. And they kept referring back to Tiger Woods. And I know he's greatness, and you never want to use like total greatness, but I'm going to use Tiger Woods, because when Tiger Woods won at the same golf course, now it was burnt out because they were having a drought. It was 2006. Tiger Woods at that time, as great as he is, had no clue where his driver was going. None.
Yeah.
None. Like
He
he
could
had
hit
no
it real
clue.
far.
He could, yeah, but he was foul pole to foul pole. Like he did.
Yeah.
In 72 holes. Now, obviously, the par threes doesn't count, but in the 72 holes of this event, he hit driver one time. He hit
He just took it out of his bag.
iron over and over and over again, and just let it roll on the dead fairways, basically. You know why? Because he just did what he did
He
to
could hit the
compete
greens.
and win.
He
He
could
didn't
hit the
have his
greens.
best. He didn't have his
Yeah.
best stuff. Tiger went out for 4 days without his best stuff, without confidence in his driver. And while everybody else is playing their full bag of clubs, he wasn't playing his full bag, but he still won. His
Yeah.
stuff plus that day stunk for 4
Yeah.
days. But what
Yeah,
he
Clark
did
Schmidt.
but what he did was, he's a competitor and he's a great champion, and he goes, the hell with it. I'm going to do whatever. And that's the problem. We're teaching our athletes in baseball that their stuff plus their best better show up every day. And the reality is it does. Pete Rose always has talked about, if you're in a slump, up in the box, back in the box, choke up, like
Just change it
same
up.
swing got you the big. So it's like, it's amazing how we're so into data, which is great. I love the data, but at some point you got to go out there and win and compete.
Yeah, and I think the lesson from this, I mean, Clark Schmidt said, like, I was like, are you throwing your sinker and your sweeper more against lefties? Because those are pitches that have big platoon splits. Like, why would you throw those pitches more? And that's how we got into this conversation, because he was like, yeah, if I don't throw them, then I'm super predictable. Then they know I'm just cutter change or whatever I am, against lefties. They know that that's all they have to look for. So I have to throw these other things, even though they're not optimal, in order just to change it up. To change it so I'm not predictable. And so I wonder if the thing that we have to think about, or teams have to think about, is just, how do we mix these two ideas? One is, I want to develop you by showing you how your pitches could best look like Verlanders and this guys and Glasnows and this guys. I want you to develop your pitches so that they work. I want you're forcing him to have ride or this. I want to coach you in that way, because in the minors, it doesn't matter about winning. And I just want you to have better pitches. But at some point, you flip that switch, you're in the major leagues, and now it matters about winning. And you can't just be sitting there and be like, well, I had a 22 IVB on my fastball today. You got whooped. So, you have to somehow in the minors also prepare them for that. Like, maybe it's good catchers. Maybe it's coaching the catchers to, like, go to the mound and be like, hey, I know that the pitching coach wants you to, work on your fastball today, but we also need to get some outs. So, let's throw some cutters here, or, whatever it is, So I wonder, maybe AAA becomes a place where you care about winning again, and you send them to AAA and you tell them, here in AAA, it's not about what you're doing with your slider or your fastball or whatever. It's about winning, and we need to practice winning, so that when you get to the major leagues, crap, my sweeper's not sweeping today. Everyone goes to Denver. Everyone has to play in Coors, and in Coors, Hunter Brown was like, oh yeah, I lost 7 inches off my fastball ride, and I lost 5 inches off my curveball. And Martin Maldonado came out and said, dude, this ain't working. We got to do something else.
That's a lot. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, you start thinking about what you normally have, and not now essentially instead of having that, it's just spinning.
Yeah.
Hit
Yeah.
me, hit me, hit me,
And in
right?
fact, the best pitches to throw in Denver are pitches that don't move as much. So tight sliders, hard sliders. So yeah, Hunter Brown was like, "Well, I throw a 92-mile-an-hour bullet slider, so I guess we're just going to throw a lot of those today."
They're like Darryl Kyle had that great overhand 12-6 curveball, and then all of a sudden he got to Denver and it was just
Yeah,
whoo,
exactly. So yeah, like,
whoo.
and in the minors you do have these parks, and you could just shrug, in double A and say whatever, it's Colorado Springs, whatever. Or you could say, "Hey, let's see what it'd be like to try and win here today and see what and make it work with whatever you've got and not just be, I have to throw 10 curveballs today." Well, not if it's just spinning up in the air.
Well, I'm excited. Starting next week, we're going to hear commercials from you.
Yeah, I've got to voice a commercial for field work. We're gonna see. I'm sure I'll mess it up somehow.
We'll write the scripts. You just got to use that lovely voice.
All right. I still every time I have to do it for my pod, I freeze
Yeah.
up.
Get ready. Eno Sarris coming to you inside Oakland A's games. It's going to be fabulous. You have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.